Hi everybody, it's Nick. So today the news hit that the government rejected the proposed new changes to make menopause a protected characteristic and treated such as maternity leave rather than sickness leave. And there's been, I know, very differing views on this and a lot of disappointment for women that that's been the case. Now, I'm a big, I think I'd like to call myself an activist in the menopause space because, I've experienced firsthand. Gosh, look at my hair. Sorry, very vain, not a moment to be vain. I've experienced firsthand what the menopause means and how life-changing it can be. And I think I'm very, very vocal on trying to make the world a better place and bring in better support. So it might surprise people to know that I'm not actually that disappointed. And I don't actually think I support that approach. And why would that be? Well, I think there is a genuine argument that says it is not about making women less employable. The menopause can stretch over a number of years. And I don't think the answer is just for us to be able to take leave. Because, bear with me, please bear with me, because this is quite a nuanced, sophisticated point I want to make. So for me, the real foundational thing that needs to be addressed is the support via our health service, and particularly via GPs. And if we can actually get that right and have a far more holistic and empowering approach to treating the menopause, I think a lot of menopausal women will be in a very, very different space. So I know before I got the right support, which I paid for privately because I was not able to get it through the NHS. Okay, that's the bottom line. It just wasn't available, and it still isn't available. They'll give me a HRT patch, and that's about it. And that is not anywhere near enough. So I have a private consultant. I have a very holistic treatment plan, which does include medical interventions, but it also includes therapeutic interventions, all of which I pay for. But what that means is that I'm a pretty functional woman, and I achieve quite a lot in my life. And that's because the support I get enables me to do that. So I think the first step is actually focusing there. The second step is whether you are male or female, there are certain times in life where we will all face challenges. The menopause is one of them. I've got lots of examples I could give, which I'm not going to actually, because they're not my examples. They're for my husband, so that's his business. I can tell my stories. It's not up to me to tell other people's stories. But the point is, there are lots of times in life where challenges occur and we need to be able to perhaps step back from work. We perhaps can't engage as fully as we have been. And actually, the really fundamental thing there is to have psychologically safe cultures and humane workplaces. People that you can go and speak to at work. And you don't need to have rules and regulations and laws passed for them to do the right thing. They do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that is about a much more flexible and humane working practice. And I think that's where our energy should also be focused. I think a third aspect is also on the education. So I still encounter a lot of prejudice, subconscious and conscious bias around the menopause and middle-aged women. And actually, I think if the legislation had been passed, that would have increased, in my personal opinion, about, menopause women are this, and this is the narrative. And it's a much, much deeper conversation around the narrative around ageing and women and the perspective on that. So just to give an example, you know what? Killer Whales, the leader of the pod, is always the female after she's gone through the menopause. because she does not have dependence on her, but she has the wisdom and experience required to lead the pod. And I think we're really missing a trick as a society in that we don't have that same attitude towards aging women. So there's something far more fundamental that needs to be addressed about our attitudes towards aging women, middle-aged women in particular, because the depth of experience and wisdom is quite significant. But whether you are going through the menopause or not, and whether you are male or female or not, I would argue that there aren't that many people who really want to dedicate 50 or 60 hours a week or whatever it is to an organisation. I would argue that actually we all want to work smarter, not longer. And we want to have more freedom in our lives. And that comes back round to the whole conversation around more flexible working, around actually being more productive in a shorter amount of time. And again, there's another narrative, another cultural change required around the fact that we don't have to flog ourselves and enter burnout and all of those things. So for me, I think there's some really fundamental foundational pillars that need to be addressed to really solve this equation. And I don't think it is as simple as saying, I mean, you know, it would, it's not as simple as saying, you know, let's let women take a year off to cope with menopause, which would be helpful, don't get me wrong. That would be fantastic. I mean, in Indigenous tribes, you know, they have something called the Crohn's year, which is where, you know, women who are entering this phase go off and they need a period of reflection and so forth. But actually, I think that lots of people might want that for lots of different reasons. And actually, that can be really healthy from a creativity and a reset and a re-energizing and a redirection and repurposing and remotivating perspective. I don't think you have to be a menopausal woman to actually benefit from taking some time out of work. So if we just narrow it down to only menopausal women, I'm not sure that's really addressing it. For me, being a menopausal woman, what stops me going back into the workforce? What stops me going back into the corporate world I left? One is I don't want to lose my freedom. And actually the demands that will be put upon me are far greater than I'm able to meet. And that is not because I'm menopausal. That's because I just don't want to. I just don't want to give up all of my other freedoms and flexibility. If it was more flexible and less demanding, I would absolutely be open to a conversation. That's the first point. The second point is, yes, as a menopausal woman, there are days when I'm just not up to it. But there aren't very many of those. And the reason there aren't very many of those anymore is because I have a really, really good medical and therapeutic treatment plan around me, which enables me to be able to make the very most of my life, despite the fact that I'm going through the menopause. But I have to pay for all of that. So I am one of a privileged few. So if we want, you know, more women to be able to embrace life, and actually the reason we should do it is because actually we want women to be able to live a fulfilling life, not just because we want them to be productive in the workplace. I don't think that should be a driving force. That absolutely is icing on the cake, but it shouldn't be the driving force. The driving force is actually we want to be able to enable women to have a really fulfilling life in their middle age and not to be living what can be very desperate realities when they're not given the support they should be given. Okay, so that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is around the prejudice and the subconscious bias, which I've actually come across in the medical profession. Actually, an awful lot. People make all of this noise around businesses and whether it's there and whether, you know, businesses are up to the mark and whatever. But actually, I do find a lot of it is actually in the medical profession, the profession that is meant to be helping us. And I think that if we had a far better education and far better psychologically safe workplaces and cultures, then actually a lot of that could be dealt with. Because it's like mental health in the workplace. You know, it's the same thing. We need psychologically safe cultures. And we need leadership with kindness and empathy. And we need to recognise that everybody sometimes in life faces challenges for a whole host of reasons. And we need to have humane employers that can respond to that and that can effectively play the long game and say, okay, for this point, this person needs more support, needs to step out, needs some time out, and so forth. But the minute we start to legislate and put, very rigid rules and regulations around it, it becomes this tick box exercise. And for me, that kind of defeats the object, because actually this is about people doing the right thing for the right reasons. So, and I am just having a menopausal moment thinking, is there anything else that I wanted to point out? I think there was, I think the key point I'm trying to make here is I don't think the legislation is the answer. I think there's some far more fundamental things that need to be changed, particularly in our health service and the way menopause women are supported, and the education and the perspectives and the attitudes towards it, and also just in our whole approach to work and burnout and work-life balance, and being able to allow people to engage in work without having to give up all of their freedom. And I think all of these things play a part, and it's a very, very, it is quite a complex and nuanced solution that is required, that actually does require people doing the right thing for the right reasons, for humane reasons. And there is such an enormous amount of talent and wisdom and experience out there in so many women of my age. It is untrue. But I'm sure if you speak, so for me personally, I can say I'm one of the blessed few with a treatment plan that enables me to actually really engage in the world and live my life quite fully. I do have bad days, don't get me wrong, I do. But on the whole, I live my life quite fully. But even given that, I don't want to give up my freedom. That's the bottom line. I don't want to give up my freedom. There's some far more fundamental stuff that needs addressing here. Far more fundamental. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. And I think they're the changes that we need to be fighting for. So I am not as disappointed as people might expect me to be, because I am not convinced that legislation was actually going to deal with the root causes and therefore put the appropriate solutions in place that would really make a fundamental difference. Gosh, I'm really stepping out, aren't I, and putting my neck on the line. I'm sure I might get quite a lot of backlash to this, but that's okay. That is okay, because what we should be doing is having these respectful debates, because this is a complex problem. It's a complex thing that needs to be dealt with. So we need the debates. We need to open our minds. We need to challenge each other. We need to be curious. We need to come up with new ideas. We need to come up with new solutions. So that's okay. So if I trigger something in you, if I've pissed you off by this, that's okay. Let me do that, but to the end that it makes us think and it makes us come up with a better way forward, because I'm not sure that was it. Okay. Lots of love. Thank you for listening.